Picture this. It's the summer of 2005, North Yorkshire, pretty quiet place. A 19-year-old musician, Jenny Nicol, tells her mom she's off for the night. She'll be back tomorrow. Simple enough, right? Except she was never seen again. What happened next was a frantic search that unraveled a secret relationship, a bizarre trail of text messages, and an incredible forensic technique that would point right to a killer. Okay, let's get into it.
She just didn't come home one night. Those are the words of Jenny's mom, Anne. And they're just so simple, but so haunting. They really capture that terrifying moment when your world just cracks open. 1 minute, everything's normal. And the next, you're living in a complete nightmare. It's every parent's worst fear.
So before we go any further, let's talk about who Jenny really was. Because she's not just a name in a case file. She was a 19-year-old with a life. She was a huge Jimi Hendrix fan, loved being outdoors, loved camping. She even poured that passion into her own rock band. She lived at home with her folks, had a job at the local co-op. She was a daughter, a friend, a musician, with her whole future ahead of her. All right, so let's go back to the very beginning, those first few hours and days after Jenny vanished. This is where a family's quiet worries starts to escalate into a massive police investigation. This timeline really shows you how fast everything just spiraled out of control. June 30th, she leaves home. Sounds totally normal. The very next day, she misses plans with a friend. A little weird. By July 4th, she's a no-show for her shift at work. That's when the panic sets in. Her mom reports her missing, and then, later that same day, her car is found, just abandoned in a pub parking lot. And then came a truly chilling discovery. In a nearby wooded area, her own parents found some of her things. Cosmetics, a night dress, just sort of half hidden. Can you imagine finding that yourself? It was a terrifying sign that this wasn't just some teenager staying out too late. Something was really, really wrong. So the police start digging. They talk to her friends who say she was pretty private, kept things to herself. That meant the investigators had to uncover the secrets she wasn't sharing, which led them to one massive question. And here's the answer they found. Jenny was involved with a guy named David Hodgson. He was in his 40s, more than twice her age, married, with 2 kids who she actually used to go to school with. This wasn't just some affair, it was a secret relationship that had started when Jenny was only 14 years old. An adult manipulating a teenager for years. Of course, Hodgson denied it at first, but the evidence was there. Just as the police started zeroing in on Hodgson, something really weird happened. A bunch of text messages, supposedly from Jenny's phone, start getting sent out to her friends and family. At first glance, maybe they offered an explanation. But the closer you looked, the more you realized they just made everything a whole lot stranger. So this first text comes through. It says she's okay. She's in Scotland with a new boyfriend. For a family going out of their minds with worry, this was maybe a tiny flicker of hope. But the tone just felt a bit off. A little too rehearsed, maybe? It didn't quite sound like a real, spontaneous message from a scared teen. Then another message follows, kind of building on this story that she's just a rebellious teenager who's run off. But the police, they were getting more and more skeptical. The way it was phrased, the whole story, it felt less like Jenny and more like someone pretending to be Jenny. And then came this third text, this one to her dad. And this one was totally different. It was nasty, aggressive. It was full of this anger that was just not the daughter her parents knew. For them, this message wasn't just out of character, it was impossible. It sounded nothing like their Jenny. So this became the absolute crucial question, right? Were these texts some sort of genuine, if really hurtful, cry for freedom, or were they a complete fake, a calculated deception? Police were betting heavily on the second one. They figured someone was trying to lay a false trail, desperate for everyone to just stop looking. And the actual evidence was screaming that the runaway story was bogus. I mean, look at this. Her bank account, untouched. She just paid for a block of 25 tanning sessions. Who does that if they're about to disappear? No bus tickets, no hotel rooms. Her passport was still at home. Every single practical clue said that wherever Jenny went, she had no plans to be gone for long. Okay, so the physical search is hitting dead ends, and the texts are looking like a total hoax. So the investigation takes a turn into this really fascinating and pretty new at the time field of science. And this is where the entire case just cracks wide open. So the police bring in an expert in what's called forensics linguistics. Basically, it's the science of analyzing language for clues. Think about it. We all have our own unique way of writing and talking, our little quirks in spelling, grammar, how we use punctuation. It's like a linguistic fingerprint. And the mission here was to see if the fingerprint on those mystery texts matched Jenny's or someone else's.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The expert compared the mystery texts to messages they knew for sure were from Jenny, and he found these tiny but super consistent differences. Look here. Jenny would write today with no space. The mystery texts put a space. Jenny used contractions like I'm. The fake text spelled out I am. Jenny spelled phone as F-O-N-E. The fake text spelled it correctly. The conclusion was crystal clear. There was almost no way Jenny wrote those messages.
So if Jenny didn't write them, who did? Well, the linguists then got writing samples from David Hodgson. And this is the final damning piece of the puzzle. The mystery texts had these really specific spelling mistakes, like off with only one F and spelling might as M-I-T-E. So the police have Hodgson do a writing exercise, and what do you know? He makes the exact same mistakes. The linguistic fingerprints were a perfect match. They had found the words of the killer.
With that powerful language evidence, plus a lot of other circumstantial clues, this was no longer a missing person case. It was a murder trial. So let's head to the courtroom and see how it all played out.
The prosecution laid out a really clear step-by-step case. They argued that Hodgson murdered Jenny, probably when they were out camping. He then got rid of her body, hiding it so well that it's never been found. Then, to cover his tracks, he used her phone to send those fake texts. And the final blow? Car rental records put him in the exact remote spots where the texts were sent from, on the right days with hundreds of miles on the car that he just could not explain. After a 5-week trial, the jury didn't take long. Their verdict was unanimous: guilty. David Hodgson got life in prison with a minimum of 18 years. The judge said the evidence against him was entirely overwhelming and pointed out that through the whole thing, Hodgson showed not the slightest regret or remorse. But here's the thing. A guilty verdict doesn't always mean the story is over. For Jenny Nichols' family, the conviction was justice, sure, but it couldn't bring them peace, because the biggest piece of the puzzle is still missing. And this is where an important law called Helen's Law comes in. It basically says that when a killer, like David Hodgson, comes up for parole, the board has to consider the fact that he's refused to say where his victim is. His silence isn't just cruel to the family anymore, it's now an official, legal reason to keep him behind bars. To this day, David Hodgson has never said what he did with Jenny's body. He's holding on to that one last awful secret. This quote from her mom, Anne, just perfectly captures the pain of that silence. The idea that her daughter, her child, was just thrown away like she meant nothing, when to her family, she was, and she still is, absolutely everything. And that's really the question we're left with, isn't it? The justice system did its job. The killer's in prison. But without being able to bring their daughter home and lay her to rest, the Nichol family is stuck in this horrible limbo, held hostage by one man's silence. It makes you ask, what does justice truly mean when the final answer is locked away forever?